Hello and welcome. Whether you're joining us live in our studio audience here in the beautiful Cable Center in Denver, Colorado, or joining us on the NCTI YouTube page, we're glad that you joined us today. So NCTI, collaborating with the Rocky Mountain chapter of WICT, is very excited to bring you a panel today that is informative, exciting. It's filled with people that are thought leaders. They're actually industry leaders as well, but they also come from really diverse backgrounds when it comes to the change that's going on currently in the industry, change that they've been through, current change for their careers even. So we're going to find some really, I think, interesting and topical conversations. One of the things that we love about this panel today and the conversation today is that change is not just happening professionally, but it's happening a lot personally for all of us, because technology, with our children, with our parents, we're seeing change at even an ever more rapid pace. So we're hoping that today you'll also get some tips and tools that will help you both in your professional and your personal life as well. That's what we're aiming for today. A little bit of housekeeping as well. We will have some Q&A at the end of the panel. So if you are joining us on YouTube, there's some area there in the margin where you can go ahead and submit your questions, and we're going to be collecting them. If you're here actually in our studio with us, you've got note cards. So if you'd like to, if you'll just pass your note cards all the way to the left, the last 8 to 10 minutes or so, we're going to go ahead and do Q&A with our panelists. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do an introduction of the bios. Now, I'm going to ask you to bear with me because if you had taken the time and taken a look at our bios, we've got some exceptional panelists sitting with us, and I had the option to either really trim it down or actually give you a little bit of information on each of them, and I think it helps to color the conversation that's then going to come of it. So bear with me while I give you just a little bit of information about each of them as we introduce them, and in no particular order. To my left immediately is Dr. Liz Seltzer. She's a widely sought after consultant, trainer, and keynote speaker. Her clients include NASA, ConocoPhillips, Compassion International, and the Eglin Air Force Base. As a practitioner, she oversees leadership development programs for organizations with more than 30,000 leaders in the nonprofit sector. Liz has a global expertise, and she's presented to audience around the world in countries like India, Africa, Indonesia, China, Sri Lanka, Ireland, Australia, Canada, Colombia, and oh yeah, the United States. I feel like it's more than that because I feel like every time I'm talking to you, you're leaving to a new country, so that's kind of exciting. Some of you may recognize Liz Seltzer's name because Liz actually is one of our content collaborative partners, and she's a subject matter expert with us. So if you've taken at NCTI a mentoring or leadership or change management course, chances are it's been one of the courses that comes from Liz's expertise, and you'll recognize her face as well. So if that name's familiar, that might be why. Liz also has published 3 books, countless articles. She's the co-host of a radio show. The list goes on and on. As a lifelong learner, she's earned 3 postgraduate degrees, culminating in her PhD in education with an emphasis in training and performance improvement. So that is Liz Seltzer. Moving on to Matt McConnell. Oh, perfect. You guys even sat in order. I don't know how you did that, but you guys actually sat in the order. So moving on to Matt McConnell. Matt McConnell is Senior Vice President and General Manager of Comcast Technology Solution. So Matt's actually going to walk us through a little bit. Once he starts talking to us, he's going to walk us through what the CTS group does. But what I do understand from Matt is that CTS is more the business-to-business side. So we're talking Google, Netflix. He's really dealing with them as a customer, and talk about behavior and change shifting constantly when it comes to that consumer-driven behavior. I'm really looking forward to finding out from you about that. Prior to Comcast, Matt was co-founder and CEO of Truppus Software, which was here in Boulder and was sold to EchoStar in 2011, and then went on to Comcast in 2012. He has been a senior executive at a number of organizations, to name drop a few: Level 3, AOL, the list goes on, but they're definitely prestigious. Matt holds a bachelor's in finance and management information from Boston College, a master's from Colgate Darden at the University of Virginia. He currently serves as an adjunct professor at the University of Denver and serves on the board of directors for Junior Achievement Rocky Mountain and the Colorado Innovation Network. Again, these are some great people. I'm excited to hear what they have to say. Moving on to Maria Popo. Maria is the CEO and founder of AMP10X. It's a new startup focused on developing communities and innovation centers. So it's partnered with the Cable Center at Media Amp at TCC, or the Cable Center, which is where we are today, a new co-working, learning center, and entrepreneurship group. So again, excited to hear from her because that's a completely changing kind of environment about work. And I think there's going to be a lot of insight from Maria about what that looks like. Also, Maria's background comes from the cable industry. So it'll be very interesting from her perspective from the two different sides of the industry. She focuses a lot here at the Cable Center with people that are in cable, media, and technology coming into that co-working environment. But Maria's background comes from leadership roles where she was president of UB Interactive, and she was over all of the Americas, leadership roles at Foxconn, 3Com, and 3M. That was a tongue twister. She also is Association of Women's Leadership Council, mentors entrepreneurs here in Denver, president of the Rocky Mountain chapter of WICT, and a Betsy Magnus graduate. So she's got a lot of great insight for us. That's Maria Popo. And last but certainly not least, and I told him I was going to say this, my favorite name on the panel, and I feel like I need to do a little vocal bedazzle every time I say his name, and we'd say his name around the office, is Mr. Shane Portfolio. Shane Portfolio does have the best name. Sorry to the rest of you, but. So Shane is Senior Vice President of Technical Operations and Engineering for the West, so here in our West region for Comcast. And Shane is over more of what we think of as the traditional kind of Comcast world, which is the customer. He's got 8.6 million approximately customers that he is over. He oversees the division's fiber network and IP-based infrastructure and instrumental in overseeing testing and deployment of new technologies. So he's quite impressive as far as his scope. But I told him when I was talking to him earlier that one of the things I love about his bio most is that it states that he started off in the cable business in the call center handling technical support calls in the call center and has worked his way from there to being the senior vice president of the West, over 8.9 million subscribers, which is awfully cool. Also, Shane holds a bachelor's degree from Metropolitan State here in Denver, a master's from Regis and from DU here in Denver, programs both in Dartmouth and Notre Dame, and is currently auditing the program for Stanford University's Masters of Engineering. He is on the board of directors for WICT, the National Diversity Council, vice chairman of SCTE Advanced Engineering, Region 1 director of SCTE, also a former platoon sergeant, leadership instructor for the U.S. Army, successfully completed the Army's primary leadership course, officers candidate school, and senior leadership course. So we've got some real people on this panel that have experienced a lot, and I think we're going to get some great insight. So thank you for bearing with me while I talked about everything that you guys did. I know it's sometimes embarrassing to hear that, to hear about yourself. So if we can, we're going to start with Liz. Liz, that's Dr. Seltzer, if I may.
You can call me Liz.
Thank you. In your courses, especially in some of your change courses, you really focus on the change hinge. And I know that we've got that graphic up here so people in the studio can see it and people on the YouTube stream can see it. And I think that part of the conversation may help really color everything else we talk about today. It's kind of pivotal to that. So do you mind describing it, kind of explaining it?
No, I'd be happy to. So I was trying to think of a way to explain the change process that would normalize what people go through when they're going through a change, and trying to make it, obviously this is pretty, it's pretty basic. It's going to look different in every different situation. But what I have found is there's basically 4 steps to getting through a change successfully. And the first one is recognizing that there is a loss. That in every change there is a loss of something, whether it's a loss of relationship or power, or might just be a loss of territory because you have to move offices. I mean, it just depends. And I found that if you can name what that loss is, it helps you get through that kind of icky, ooh, I don't like this change feeling. It helps you move through that. And then if you can then go to the next stage, which is uncertainty. And it's that feeling of, okay, now I'm not really sure what this change is going to look like. I'm a little nervous about it. A lot of people will feel that they have this kind of scary anticipation, like what's going to happen? What is this really going to look like? But if the change needs to happen, then the hinge of the change, and that's really that kind of the middle part of the change, we call that the hinge point, is you have to make that critical choice that you're going to actually accept that change. Whether you like it or not, that is your one place where you actually have control. You can decide that that decision is within your control, and that's where you can start taking control back, because so often I think what's really difficult for people going through a change is that they don't feel like they're in control, and they don't really know what all the elements are that relate to it. So the change really hinges on that critical choice of saying, okay, I am not going to dig my heels in. I'm not going to subtly sabotage this change. I'm going to decide that I'm going to accept this change. And then once that choice has been made, then you move to the next stage where you kind of start going back up. And it's that anticipation place where you're going, I kind of wonder what this is going to look like. What is this? You know, there's probably some good things about this. There might be some exciting things about this. It's an opportunity to learn. And so the anticipation place happens. And then finally you finish where that change finally is just so integrated into what you're doing that you feel like it's your new normal, and you feel like it's been integrated in there.
Awesome.
So that's
okay. I was just going to ask you a question. As a leader, understanding the impact of your employees, of the organization, how can you help as far as helping them understand that impact? If you understand the impact and then helping to help them ease through that transition.
Yeah, it's very important to just normalize the process and be proactive about it, because what makes it really difficult to go through a change is when people feel like they are being forced to do things they're uncomfortable doing and that they have no say in it at all. And so if you can be proactive about that process and normalize, hey, I understand you're losing this. For instance, say you have a new boss, okay? You've lost your old boss, you now have a new boss. There's a sense of loss. I mean, even if you didn't like your first boss, you know, there's still, at least you knew how to deal with that person, right? And so you all of a sudden lose, how do I do that? And then you might be uncertain, well, what's this new boss going to look like? But you have to make the choice, okay, I'm going to accept this new boss. I'm going to make the best of this situation. And that's that critical choice. And then you can start anticipating, you know, what can I learn from this new boss? What will that look like? What will my job look like? Maybe I'll be given some different responsibilities. And then finally, your new boss is your boss, and it's not your new boss anymore, and you've totally integrated that into it. So I think if you can really help people as a leader, be proactive about it, communicate what's going on, and as a leader, just be authentic about the process. I've had great leaders who were very authentic about, hey, you know what, I'm nervous about this change too. And I'm not really sure what it all looks like, but you know, I'm dedicated to making sure it works. And that's been a very helpful process for me when a leader does that.
Great. Is there any input? I mean, I've got questions for each of you, but do any of you have any input to that as far as impact for you guys and how that's impacted you? Okay. I'm going to go out of order of the way you're sitting, because I feel like what you just said piggybacks a lot on experience that, Shane, you're in the middle of, or at least it's something that's recently happened. So in May, Comcast announced that they were collapsing some of the organizations down to be kind of under one umbrella, which was a lot of change. So the care side and the technical side collapsed under one umbrella, which meant leadership change, which meant a lot of shifting within the organization. And that's got to send up a lot of nervous red flags for a lot of people. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of what that experience is like and how you manage through that for people, for your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. We are definitely in the middle of what I would consider one of the largest changes that we have seen in a couple of decades, and it's going to be on multiple fronts. It's not just the people part of the conversation. Our technology is about to change in a step function way, something more significant than we've seen in about 2 decades. It's some really big changes in that area. There's going to be some real big changes in the tools in which our employees use every day as we really start to modernize what they work on. We've really have had some legacy systems that our employees have been telling us for years are really not optimal, and we're now in a position of providing them some additional support there, and they're going to see some really good things come. And then we're going to see a lot of the people change, and the way that I've assessed the way that our senior level leaders have organized ourselves, it's a bit of preparation for that, and that we're getting ahead of where we're going. And so if we see the puck is heading that direction, we're starting to skate in that direction. And by doing that, what we're able to do is really name what our respective organizations are responsible for, and there's clean accountability, clean communication, and you know exactly who you work with for what. And I think we've, in the past, not had that level of clarity, and it has caused confusion, and it's caused us to run into each other in the outfield and a few other things. And now I think our senior team did an exceptional job of really seeing how can we get more agile, how can we make sure we do what's best for our customer, how do we make sure our employees are our top priority, and how do we streamline that all the way from our most senior level leaders at headquarters all the way to that frontline employee, and how do we organize ourselves to do that most effectively. And I think what we've seen through some of the integration is a much cleaner operation and a much easier way to interface and navigate a fairly complex ecosystem, and really kind of name the fact that headquarters really has our lead for strategy and what's coming in the next 3 to 5 years. That the divisions are really responsible for taking that strategy and building execution playbooks that help us make sure that we can work with our respective regions who are ultimately responsible for the execution of day-to-day activity for our customers. And I think by doing that, we were able to really provide a clean organizational structure that allows a lot of things to accelerate through the system.
Okay. So, and I mean, communication, 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 communication. I mean, just keep saying it again and again. You said it a bunch of different ways, but really it comes down to the more you message and the more transparent and all of that, it helps that fear. It helps people move through that transition, helps them know where they're going. It sounds like that's where you're having a lot of success.
That's right. Yeah, I think the employee side in particular, there's not an employee population in Comcast that's not about to go through a significant skill shift. Everything from inside of the home, where we were very focused for many years on craftsmanship, we're now providing these technicians wireless connected devices that do not even require us to connect to secondary and tertiary outlets. They're all wirelessly connected. So we're pivoting their skill set from not just craftsmanship, but how you show up and what that customer education and experience, and how do we show the amazing products and services that we have, and how do you focus a bit more of your time there than what you used to do, which is crawling through attics and all these other things and make sure every wire is where it needs to be. So that's a bit of a pivot. And then you think about all the technology that's outside in the network and even into our head-end facilities and our data center. There's just transformational changes happening in every one of those areas. And we have people who've spent the last 20 years kind of building this place and really getting us to where we are now that are going to have to go through a fairly significant upshift in what they do and what they operate on every day. And so I think the point of acknowledging that they're going to lose some of that as we head into this new technology, it's real easy for us in leadership to get excited about it. It's a lot harder for folks who really have demonstrated for 20 years that this is the value they provide Comcast, and now we're asking you to do something entirely different, and getting them to get excited about that is where, quite honestly, I spend the vast majority of my time these days, is really making sure that we get the hearts and minds of our employees as excited as we are in the leadership team.
I understand that. Okay, so that's a real question I have for anybody here as we're kind of moving through, and that is when you have people that have been there, they're tenured, they're very engaged, they love what they do, they're passionate, but the idea of a change that's that kind of drastic, and it's still the great organization, they're still very proud of the organization, but they have that sense of ownership to the way it was in the past. It's really hard to move those people through your hinge. How, I mean, I would love advice. I know communicate, but Liz, I know you talk about this in generational, working with multiple generations, and I don't know, is it a generational thing? Is it part of that? I embrace change. I'm a person that, when I kind of do a self-evaluation, I know that I love change. I'm a change addict, or I'm a person that shies away from change. Do you then need to really understand who you're dealing with and know your base, really? Know your employees, know how you work together, know your managers.
I don't think it's generational as much as it is where you are in your career. And if you've spent your whole life doing being valuable in a certain way, and then all of a sudden, well, that's not that valuable to us anymore. And I think it's all in how you frame that and say, okay, you are valuable. We respect everything. We are basically making these innovations on the backs of the people that, have set this great foundation. And so I think just really helping them find where they are still valuable. No one likes to feel like they're obsolete. And so really walking them through that, okay, here's where you are still bringing a lot of value to the process, I think is a really important thing.
That's a great point. Thank you.
And I would add to that, a lot of this, I think, is about the leadership, because change is inevitable and it's constant. And I think the world we're in now, as an industry and even within our own company, so from Comcast I can say the same, is it's just the new norm. We are going to change.
Yeah.
Everyone around us is moving really fast. Netflix, Google, Apple, Facebook. So then I think it comes to leadership. And to us, what we push a lot is, do you trust your leader? Has your leader engaged you to say, look, this is why we're going there. This is how we're going to go there together. So you get in the trench with the troops as well. You take risks, you arm them with the tools, because like you said, there's a lot of transition. Are you as a leader giving them the tools to go from the old to the new? And I think it really comes down to leadership at that point to get through the change, because we've not seen it generational, we've seen it experienced, to what you said. Folks know what they know, and now you're asking them to do something else. Well, let me take you there with me, and here's why we're going there, and here's how I'm going to help you get there. That defrays a lot of it, and then it's a capability question. And so then where we struggle a little bit, if the capabilities aren't going to get you there, how quickly do you make that call? Because the boat's going that way, and then you got to say, look, maybe that's just not a place we can go together, and that's hard. But it's also needed if you're trying to turn the boat in a way that gets everyone going in the same direction. So we always fall back on the leader, and are we empowering the leader with the right tools to make it through the change?
Well, and does that come from the fact that change we all kind of look at it as it's external. We're doing change to people. We're changing the organization. We're doing all this. Change is really, it has to come from within. It has to be internal. So if we aren't, to your point, saying, come along with us, we'll give you the tools that you need to make the change. I can't change you. I mean, we've all had relationships, right? I can't change you, but I'll give you the tools that you need to make the change, or else we have to decide that it's not working. But I mean, I think that's a great point.
Well, and your point there, it's a relationship. And so we always say the relationship with your boss or your peers, you spend more time with them than you do with your significant other.
Yeah.
And how much work do you do on your significant other to bring flowers or do this or do that? I mean, it's a conscious effort. I think work's the same relationship. You have to think of it as, how do you nurture that, grow that, listen, move? But there's a DNA component that people are what they are. I'm not going to make somebody a taller basketball player. It's just not going to happen. Physics and and desire. But I can give them tools to get them to a place, or find a place that's where they fit. Okay. And sometimes you can't get there. But those are the things you got to kind of work through, because it's a relationship. It's your biggest relationship in your life.
Very true. Maria, I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So with your with your AMP 10X, you're really going into this co-working space and really focusing, and I want to hear more about what it is, but focusing in technology and coming out of having been in cable for a very long time on the vendor side and equipment, and now still working with the same people and companies, but probably working with different people within the organizations. And what's it like when you personally make that change from having been a very senior level executive and kind of, I'm guessing, being able to pick up the phone, make calls, and have things happen, to almost starting over again, to developing relationships that are new, to trying to create that value proposition to this beautiful place where we are right now? I mean, this is a great space. So you're trying to say, hey, I want you to come check it out. Same people you were working with before that you could pick up the phone and have a great relationship with before. Now you're trying to kind of establish your value again. What's that change like?
Well, those people were answering my calls before. But as a president of a company, and you're engaged with them at the executive level, I'll focus on the change of people aspect of it. So engaging with people outside the cable industry has been great, because you're just learning different perspectives outside of one industry. And I've been in a couple of other industries. So now I'm at Techstars events on the weekends, right? I'm a pitch coach. I'm doing mentoring for incubators. And it's significantly different, because you're mostly dealing with entrepreneurs in that community. You're dealing with investors. You're dealing with VCs. You're dealing with these different incubators. And I'm learning a lot from them. But what I find out is that this corporate background really fits in with the startups, because they need help too, right? And it helps us look at things from a different perspective. So that aspect of meeting new people, like meeting people in government, so I'm engaged now with the city of Denver. Those kind of things are fun. That part of the change is good change. The part where, I left a corporate life with a steady paycheck for a startup is definitely the hard part of it, because so what AMP 10X is doing, we're partnered, as you said, with the Cable Center, and we are delivering this co-working space and education. And there's a lot of co-working spaces. There's a lot of innovation centers. And so what you work to do is offer something unique. So here at the Cable Center for Media AMP, it's great because we have the studios. We have the production studios here, audio, TV, video, and then also virtual reality. So people pick up on what they want to pick up. People will tell you, if you go out into the startup community right now, they might tell you that MediaAmp is a VR accelerator. So I'm like, oh, that kind of sounds kind of cool. Has nothing to do with what we're actually doing in a way. I mean, we're getting into some of that tech education and that soft skills education, sociotech, but big, huge changes where, yeah, where you wake up in the middle of the night and you're thinking about how much runway, cash runway do I have left? When I started this 30 days in, I met a woman that had a startup, and she told me that she had to sell her car to pay her employees. And I was like, I wish I heard this story before I
Probably
did
better
this.
you didn't.
Yeah. but the entrepreneur part of it is really exciting. It's you know, of course, what everybody worries about if you try to do something like that, and that's the financial side. So I kid around and say to people, okay, I drink more now, but actually I do the opposite of that, right? You have to be really mentally healthy and physically healthy in order to undergo and survive change and feel like you have more control over it. So I'll run more, I'll meditate more, those kind of things, because they really help me center. And when you move away from problems, then you're better able to think through them and find solutions.
That's a great point, because it is scary. I mean, even if it's a change you made by choice.
Right.
This is a choice, this is a change, this was a thoughtful change that you made and you wanted.
Right.
It can still be really, really scary.
Yeah.
Because it's the unknown.
Right.
Okay, can I ask you a second question that's somewhat related, but still, it's about your space, and that is, so now you're working with people that are coming in here, and you've got the entrepreneur people that are coming in here on their own, looking for that kind of space and that co-working environment. But you're also working with corporations like the MSOs that are bringing in employees because they need space for their employees.
Right.
So now, to what Liz had said in the beginning, now you've got employees who are saying, I've just lost my space. And now I'm going into this weird environment that I don't understand. The coworkers that I'm used to going to lunch with are now gone because I don't work. I mean, we can meet, but they're far away and traffic. So you've just now shifted everything. And are you finding is there any kind of a blowback, or are you hearing stuff from people like that when you have that experience, or what are you hearing from a buzz perspective?
So it's early, since we just launched in March. So I might have more or slightly different information 6 months from now. But I think that they engage well. The corporations that will come here, they're not too excited about that because for them it's a temporary change where they will move back into their permanent corporate building. So they may be here. What a lot of these co-working spaces have anchor tenants, and they'll move in and out. And sometimes it's because they're growing and going to big spaces, or in one of the situations what we have now, we have a company that has buildings that are opening up, and they're going to be moving there in a few months. So for them, they look at it as inconvenient. But then you try to sell it. We're the Google of we're the Google co-working space, right? It's cool here at the Cable Center, so they like that. And other things that we're bringing in is like doing yoga and meditation in the Great Hall, things that they enjoy that they normally wouldn't get to do. So that helps people embrace the change when they see some benefit to them personally.
Oh, that's great. All right, Matt, your turn. So Comcast Technology Solutions, and I have to get that in the right acronym, CTS. So when we were talking, you were discussing, so it's really supporting Netflix and Google and that business to business. Right. So with that, again, change, because that's what we're talking about today, with that consumer-driven behavior really changing, streaming, downloading so much. If that's your customer base, does that really change? Does that make you guys a lot more agile? Does that make you guys need to be a lot more aware of a very changing demographic, just a changing environment all the time?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, what we do is all the stuff that Shane runs and builds is 8.6 million people on top of. We look at industry and say, can we leverage that, productize that, monetize that in another way? So basically, we rent space on Shane's big machine. Thank you very much. Because he has to have the big machine anyway, so we had some stuff around it. Our change and our kind of dynamic is we're dealing with the industry. So customers of ours are Cox Cable. Cox Cable leases our X1 experience basically through a managed service, and we are the interface to Cox. We are the interface to Netflix, who rides on our backbone infrastructure that supports Shane's customer sets, residential and small business. So we're constantly listening and dealing with their change. And then we got to translate that into changing his battleship, his aircraft carrier.
Mm-hmm.
And so we live in change because we're kind of on both sides of it. Like we're like hyper agile and or crazy, however you want to define it. But I mean, I think it's kind of that, again, some of the basic tenets we talked about, folks that are comfortable with kind of sorting it out, folks we try to be hyper transparent about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it and who's responsible and accountable for what, so there's clarity. But we sit in the middle of a massive matrix, so it's a bit, you're getting change from all sides, and then just in our team of how we deal with it. So we think what we bring to the company, in addition to monetizing assets that are fixed, if you will, for the core business, insights into the market that we're seeing external to what we see through Comcast itself. So Comcast builds stuff for the 8.6 million. We're saying, yeah, but here's what Cox is seeing. Here's what Shaw Cable is seeing in Canada. Here's what Netflix and Google are seeing. So we think all that, kind of crowdsourcing, if you will, only makes our stuff stronger for our customers, which then again, it benefits the ecosystem. So it's a multi-dimensional beast, but it's fraught with matrix management and change. I mean, it's the definition of kind of the team at this point. So we do spend a lot of time on leadership and communication and transparency and trust and all that, because without that, there's not a standard day. 2 weeks from now, it's going to be different. Whereas I think the core business generally is consistent, although that'll change direction in spaces. And as Shane said, this is a big transitional for a lot of things that have come together. Ours is a little more dynamic than that, just because there's so many touch points in the industry. So it's fun. But
After all that, so it's fun.
Yeah. I mean, if you like
because
that stuff.
you like that stuff,
But if
right?
you
That's
don't
your
like that
right.
stuff, to your
It's
point,
got to be horrible for people that don't do well in
we
that
tell
environment.
folks this probably isn't the place if you like the merry-go-round. If you like the roller coaster from the movie Parenthood, which I love to quote, the old woman at the end, she's like, the merry-go-round goes around. The roller coaster goes up, down, you get sick, you're so happy, it's great, it's horrifying. That's the different, I mean, that's the type of folks we look for. Because that's the market, I mean, that's the world we're in.
So when you left from being an owner of a company and went back into the corporate world, how was that transition to go back into that?
Like anything, it's good and it's bad, right? So as you were talking about people selling their cars, I used to say I used to have a 4-foot afro. Like I was heavily haired in the entrepreneur days, because every week we're chasing payroll.
Right.
So you don't have that. You have so when you shift out of that, but you now don't have the control. So we used to own everything. If we need it, we just did it. In a company, in a corporation, there's process, there's people, there's technology, there's stuff that you didn't have to deal with. So I call that the corporate tax. And if the tax is 10%, you say, well, thank you very much for the large balance sheet, and 10% is not bad. If it's 80%, then your entrepreneurial stuff's not going to happen. And Comcast, I have to say, is a unique environment where entrepreneurism lives. And the shift to media and technology from a cable company is alive and well, and that enables it. If that wasn't the case, other companies in the area that's not their DNA, it's not going to work. And they don't have.
That's interesting to hear, because you think of Comcast being so large. It's very surprising to hear that it's got such an entrepreneurial spirit within the organization.
Well, and I say within too, because we're in Denver, so you have a little bit of benefit of space. You have the benefit too of history, because Comcast has played in this space through some of the acquisitions, through the Comcast Media Center over time. So there's a little bit of an understanding of this kind of thing. And what we've done is just put lighter fluid on it the last couple of years. So it's been accelerating because, again, the environment that Brian has set up and Robert's, and the way he trusts the leaders, he empowers them, good ideas get funded. It works. Other places, it would not work. We tried that at AOL years ago when AOL was having a decline in kind of the dial-up space. We had all this infrastructure, all this stuff, but you couldn't really get the DNA shifted to a B2B mindset to support a customer like, Xerox as a customer. Like they're like, I wouldn't buy anything from you. I'm going to go buy from level 3 AT&T, people that do this for a living. Here we have that credibility, we have that support, so it's a little bit different. We're fortunate.
Okay, so it's interesting that you mentioned Brian Roberts giving you kind of that autonomy and the ability to go do. That leads into my next question, which is good leaders and kind of who are people that have set a good example for you to be good leaders. I'm willing to also listen to who, without names, have been. Give me an example of some bad leadership if you want to. Whatever jumps to your mind, I would love to hear. It sounds like obviously Brian's saying, you know what, go do. We support you in being aggressive, assertive, and an outside the box thinker. We like it, as long as it makes sense. So I would love ideas of just people that, and something that would resonate here for you to give an example would be fantastic. Of any good leader that you've had that's helped you on either through change or just even just a great leadership quality. I mean, because I think that in and of itself is part of the process.
I have one, but I just was talking, so
you can start. That gives them time to think, so that's good.
And I'll use Brian as the example. When I started at Comcast 5 years ago, so I'm on my 5-year window now, he was asked in a forum that said, tell me what's going to happen in 10 years and where's technology going and this and that. And what he said is, I have no idea. He said, this moves so fast. But what I do know is I will hire great people, and great people will figure out problems, and we will be in good position. And to me, that was the traits: very humble, very aware, kind of like, look, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years in this market. It's a bit fodder to think you do know. And so I think his authenticity, his humbleness, his wisdom in saying that struck me. And I use that story in every leadership thing I do and everyone we hire, and say, look, if you have good people who will solve problems, you will have a winning position in the world. If it's a bunch of prima donnas or really, really smart people, but they don't play nice in the sandbox, you will not achieve what you could have if the team was all humming. So I took that away as a huge, I'm not just saying that because he's my boss and maybe he's watching. And it is 5 years.
Love you, Brian.
But I think it's very, to me, that's very real and simple, and I can get my hands around it. And he lives it every day. I mean, I think and again, that's the other one I'd add is, when you hear it as one thing, when you see it lived the way they say it, then you believe it, trust it, want to be a part of it.
So that's a question I have. So that also is a sign of trust.
Yes.
He trusts. He's trusting.
Yes.
Which is awesome.
Which is huge, because that allows people to go build and do. And again, to the point of good ideas will get funded. Bad ideas shouldn't get funded. No harm, no foul. But you'd still put it up, and maybe other smart people would say, look, well, here, have you thought about this? That's exactly the dynamic you want. And you say, okay, that's cool. We tried. It didn't make sense. Let's try the next one.
You want everyone to have a voice, but you want to trust your leadership and know enough to know that if you put it out there and people go, oh, probably not a good idea, you believe in them.
Go on to the next one.
Yeah.
Well, and I love the trust thing is so critical. If you trust your leader, you have a little more space for change, because you're like, okay, I trust where you're going. I can follow that. I think also communication, and you said it very authentic. Just an example, I was in an organization where we were changing kind of the mission statement, I guess, of what we were doing. And at the corporate office, we had talked about it and talked about it and talked about it till we were like, okay, I'm sick of talking about this. It's like, ugh. But what we had to remember is that we were bored with it, and because we'd repeated it so much and everything. But when we were putting it out to the 30,000 leaders around the country, they were hearing it for the first time. And one of the things I think our leader did very well was she reiterated why we were changing, what we were doing again and again and again, ad nauseum for us at corporate. But I just think it's one of those things you have to remember when you're in the corporate office, you're hearing all this. The people out there, that are in the field don't hear it as often. And so I think that was one thing that was very strong at getting that change done, is just remembering that piece of it.
It's important. I was recently at an MSO, and we were in an event, and they'd just been acquired, and you were hearing all of the management people talking from a management perspective about, yep, nothing's going to change, everything's going to be fine. That's their management conversation. But when you heard the people that are the front line walking around, all you heard them talking about was, oh yeah, that's what they say, but boy, things are going to change, and heads are going to roll, and we're going to be gone. And it was so different to see the trust level and what the two different organizations, the two different divisions within the organizations really felt about the messaging and how authentic the messaging is. And so you have to have the level of trust where they feel like, number one, if you're telling me this, I believe you. And then obviously managing up, where if that's the information I get, I need to feel comfortable that that's also correct information that I'm getting. And I know you can't always be 100% authentic there, because sometimes you're privy to information that you can't share. But still, there has to be that kind of trust that's there. There's just so much grumbling going through, like, yeah, well, that's what they say. So it's really an interesting place in this kind of it's an environment of fear when something like that's going on, and that trust and just that lack of control to your world. You really feel like your power is gone, and that's hard for a lot of people.
I think as a leader, you have to do a lot of spot checks within your organization, right? Because everybody's world is usually just the immediate people that they're surrounded by. And so if they don't have a leader that they're reporting to that gives them that confidence that maybe they don't have a relationship, they really have a bad view of the corporation. So that's why as senior leaders, a lot of times what you'll see them doing. So I was at the top since 2002. So I'm always checking a couple levels down. You know how people don't feel like they can go over their boss's head? That's a big problem, actually, because then you don't have a good temperature of feel for what's happening in the organization. So that, I think, is for me, the best leaders were a lot of the people that report to me, because they're the ones that lift me up and also lift the rest of the company up because by their actions and their words to the rest of the organization.
I think there isn't anything more essential to a culture than leadership, and I think that we have seen several examples of both good and bad leadership, and what the benefits of good leadership is and what the bad impacts are to folks that aren't doing as well. And what I really do appreciate about the Comcast culture is that while we are this large company, we still have this family-oriented feel that really started with our founder and kept with Brian, and it's genuine, and you can just feel it when you get together. We just recently had a meeting where Dave Watson's first meeting as our CEO got all of the senior level teams together to give us a bit of a view of what his priorities are and how we can rally around to support him as he takes on this new responsibility. And the level of humility of all of those folks that were there, and the level of wanting to be in service of us because they know that it's our expectation to be in service of our employees, was a level of role model demonstration that just was infectious. And we all went back to our respective areas of responsibility and just couldn't wait to cascade that same message to our employees so they can cascade it all the way to the front line. And just at a company this size, you very rarely see that the core foundation is still alive and thriving, and the foundations of the principles that Ralph built this company on are still core to our mission. And that meeting really validated that, and the employees rally around that in a big way when it's genuine. An example for us that the employees have challenged us on is this notion of customer experience being a high priority for us. We've been saying that for many years, but if we were being self-critical of our investments, we weren't necessarily supporting that message. And then a couple years ago, Brian had a pretty direct message to us and leaders and saying, look, we're going to really, really do this time, and we're going to make the right investments. We're going to make this the priority. And I can tell you with level of integrity that we are absolutely on that mission, and our employees are starting to feel it, and the folks who have been a bit apprehensive of believing whether or not this was true are really starting to come around. And even our customers, we have now deployed this net promoter system that a couple years ago as a company we were in the negatives, and now we are seeing this increase, and we're in the West Division for the first time in the positive space, and we're just seeing that it's resonating with our employees and it's resonating with our customers. And so the mission that he put us on, the investments are happening, the culture is getting there, and our employees are believing it, and our customers are feeling it. And so that's pretty awesome, because it is a big difference than what we've kind of been known for a long time.
So now what you just described is managing through this enormous amount of change over the last couple of years, and productivity growing a lot. Is that messaging? Is it the infectious belief in the organization and the culture at the organization? I mean, you kind of just said it's all of the above.
Yep.
If you could say to anybody, okay, how do you keep productivity moving forward when you're going through sometimes very drastic changes and sometimes negative press and things like that were happening, that we need to change this message? It sounds like what you just answered, but I'd like to kind of just confirm that.
So I think the narrative is what's important. Words matter, details matter. Employees listen to what we have to say as leaders, and if we say the wrong thing, it could be very disruptive. So you have to be very thoughtful about the message that you give folks. And so in the case of this change and evolution to a customer experience as our best product culture, we had to demonstrate that that was in fact happening. And so we would have to make sure that every small victory that we had, we recognized it, we acknowledged it, we made sure the employees felt it, we didn't just ignore it and keep moving. And so taking the time out to really pause and reflect and acknowledge the work that you are doing, because it is a large mountain and we're still climbing it. So by any means, we are not at the top of this thing. But we are making steps. And every time that we do that, for example, this most recent achievement I talked about earlier about a positive NPS, we shouldn't be proud that we're at 1 point positive. But if we look 2 years ago, we were negative 25. That's huge, right? So let's not ignore the accomplishment, but let's get excited that we should be positive 25, and we should be even more than that. And we're on a mission to do that. And what are the things that got us there? It wasn't just hard work and grit and all this. It was smart decisions, investments, and it was ultimately our employees that executed for us and making sure that they're supported. So I think that's what we have been doing a lot better job at, is communication, letting them know when we see victories, letting them know that they are a huge part, if not the vast majority of those victories, and making sure they feel empowered and influenced in our journey.
That's great. You just motivated me to say that right now. I'm ready to go out there now. We are getting close to the time that we're going to go to Q&A, but I have one more quick question that I wanted to find out, and this may be more of a Liz question, but it could go to anybody, and that is just on identifying or how to self-identify, because in order to, I feel like you need to really understand how you react in that environment, and then you need to understand how your peers react, how the people that work with you, for you, how your management above you. You really do need to understand what the culture is around you when it comes to change. Is it somebody that is a little bit change phobic? And do you need to kind of know how to work with them? Do you need to do a very honest self-evaluation? I mean, how do you really truly evaluate yourself and say, all right, I am in a leadership position, but I don't do well with change. And so how do I embrace the change that we're on this roller coaster and know that this is my job and I love my job, but it is a roller coaster and I've got to embrace that. How can I kind of make that change in my own life to accept who I am and maybe move on that hinge as well, even just about my personality?
Well, I think the answer is definitely you should self-evaluate, just because you're coming from your lens. And see, I am the opposite. I am a change junkie. I love changing stuff all the time, but it's also changes that I have some say in. And so, I would get very frustrated when I was a lot younger in leadership when people didn't want to change. I was like, what's wrong with these people? They're just old and stodgy. And I was making these very harsh judgments on people, and instead of understanding that everyone has a different personality and people deal with change differently. So I think for leaders, if you can just really recognize what your change, how you view change, are you a change junkie? Are you a learner through change? Are you somebody who's a change avoidant person? Or whatever that looks like, I think just being aware of that so that you don't assume that everyone on your team is going to react the same way. And then I believe, good leaders know their teams. I mean, they have spent time with people. They will start saying, hey, you know what, I'm noticing that I'm watching your face and I'm thinking this isn't going over too well. Tell me what's going on and explain to me how you're feeling about that. And I think those relationships, hopefully, if you're a good leader, they have been established ahead of time so that when the change comes, it's not this, thing coming in from above that you don't, you can't function with that. I think it's important that that has been set and that trust has been built. I love that you've mentioned that a number of times. I think, again, when we trust our leaders, then, again, we're a little more willing to go along with that.
Go behind them.
Yeah, I think the lens piece, it's spot on again. I mean, for me, I was 18 years old, activated in the military, and responsible for people's lives. And so that influenced my lens, and it still does to this day. And so when it comes to change, I feel it's my responsibility as a leader to make sure that I champion that for my people. And it's a level of service of my organization that I take personal responsibility for. And while I may not be as directly responsible for their lives as I was in the military, I still feel it's my responsibility to help provide what I consider kind of this North Star of here's where we're going, and be really transparent with them as an effort of service, and that's been kind of my foundation and my lens, and will continue to be. And that's what I think the responsibility we have as leaders, and that's what I get charged about. I may not necessarily get as excited about the actual technology or the tactics or the processes that we're changing, but what I'm excited about is the responsibility of the hearts and minds of the people and helping them get through the journey. That's what I really enjoy doing.
Self-awareness, right?
Mhm.
And those temperature checks are important because as everyone is talking, and I am on the outside of now, especially of a lot of big corporations, sometimes people at the very top level think that everything's going great because they have that certain circle, right, that are closest to them, and they're getting the message probably the way it should be delivered. But then sometimes I hear about from people that are at the manager or lower level, and they describe the company as the Hunger Games, right? Because, and I hear,
Wow.
and that's not uncommon in large corporations, right? And so the way you test for that, I think you look at turnover, right? I've had companies that have talked about, can you help us, we have high turnover, and a lot of times you say, take a look at the leader too. Don't assume it's only the company culture. A lot of times it has to do with leadership, especially in technical leaders have a tendency sometimes not to potentially
soft step right
feel
there.
that soft skills are so important, right? And but it's really important. People need that communication, trust, that relationship.
And it sounds like flanking you have people that are advocates, right? And they are into the relationships and all that, but you're not always lucky enough to have that.
Right.
And we've all been there,
Right.
definitely.
Exactly.
Okay, so we do have some questions that we want to get to, and we're down to the last few minutes. So one of the questions that came in was, does change help identify emerging leaders within your organization? So do you find that the leaders kind of rise to the top?
Absolutely. And I think as good leaders, you look for those that you think are rising stars to give them the opportunities as they pop, right? Because opportunities are serendipitous at some points. And so you might have great folks that just have never had a chance. So we've just done a bit of work to say, who are our top 10? Forget about job, what they're doing. How do I give them something more and bigger? And that has kind of, as Shane was saying, like, I just want to make other people great and have servant leadership. And so you put them in those positions, and I think change is a mechanism to drive more of that.
Love the servant heart, the servant leadership thing, and it sounds like obviously that's going on a lot at your organization, but we're trying to get it to go on more in our industry, period, because we've got a lot of people out there who have that same feeling, and we need that message to kind of bubble up just a little bit more. Okay, we got a question for Liz. How do you find the ability to embrace change working overseas? And is it easier to bring change in as an American or as a local national? Does this also translate to cultural groups? And I know you've got some interesting perspective on culture.
That's a big question. Oh, for goodness sake. So I think when you work with differing cultures, you need to understand them. And change looks different in different cultures, and people handle it based on where they perceive their locus of control is, where their values are. So as far as bringing change, like when I go to another country, I definitely work with the indigenous leadership always. And I have them brief me. Now, I will say sometimes having another voice come in, people tend to listen to it just because it's some new person's coming in from the United States, oh, big deal, right? So they may listen to me, but if I haven't really been really well informed by the cultural things that affect people's perception of change. For instance, when I was just working in Beijing not too long ago, and they're so communal there that when we were talking about change with them, it wasn't, we're so individualistic here, we're thinking, okay, how does this affect me? So the change hinge looks really different in Beijing, because they're going, okay, it's not how it affects me. Okay, how does it affect my parents? How does it affect my community? How does it affect my family? And it's not me first. And so I think, again, being more culturally aware, listening is so important. It's actually a universal thing that builds trust everywhere I've been. Being someone who listens and don't just go in bulldozing in thinking you know everything. I mean, I have seen some Western people going into some other cultures, and the people are really nice and nodding their heads, and then the person leaves and they're like, yeah, we're not doing that. So I think just being culturally aware and listening, and I think that's probably the best thing to do.
And I will say Liz has some really good stories of some really interesting things. So if you're looking for her, like check her out on LinkedIn because she's got some great stories of what's happened with her and other cultures and dealing with women's groups have been really, really interesting, and women's groups in Africa when she's been training, and some really interesting stuff. Another question. What have you found to be the best way to improve employee morale during a major change? I think we did touch on this to a certain extent, but if there's anything we didn't touch on?
Beer.
Beer.
Yeah, pizza's a close second.
Pizza.
Seriously.
I think when
There's
you
a lot of people that want to work for you guys right now. I want you to know that.
but I think to that one, this is the human bit. Like you're going through the change together. Let's go get off campus or out of the office. A couple $100 happy hour just to get folks to kind of be a part of it. I find those things help because people are people.
And remembering that they have families and they have, I mean, I feel like we sometimes forget that in corporate and trying to check in with how they're dealing with the change at home. Is it carrying over and creating any kind of issue?
And can I just say a sense of humor? Like if you treat this change as this big ominous monster, you're putting a weird emotion in there. And if you instead can, be authentic. Yes, it's serious, and we're very focused, and we're very sold on why we're doing this, and it's important. But we can kind of laugh at ourselves too. That maybe we're insecure in certain aspects of this change, and I think that's not to take it so seriously sometimes is helpful.
I think it was you, Matt, that said you don't have to come in and know every single thing. You can come in and be authentic and just be open. And so I think that kind of piggybacks on what you just said. Another question here is there a specific type of personality who adopts change better than others?
I don't think it's in personality per se. I think there's all types of personalities that handle change well. I think what change does expose is emotional maturity, and I think that crosses over multiple personalities and different people's backgrounds and things like that. But when you see somebody who really steps up to the plate and demonstrates a really high level of emotional maturity, those are the ones that we tend to look to Matt's point earlier, to really empower to help us through change. And you can see that pretty quickly when they're exposed to kind of seeing where we're going. And are they mature about it? I think any type of personality can really have emotional maturity, but I think emotional maturity is a key ingredient to their personality.
And I think ownership and control is also just another piece. The more that they can feel like they know what's going on, they've been communicated to, they had a voice. I mean, people don't have to have their way followed, they just need their way considered, and that they feel like they were genuinely listened to. And gee, we didn't do what you said, but we heard you, and this is what we're doing, and this is why, I think can help also.
So we've got one more question. We might have time for more than one, but we are down to our last minute. So I do want to say really quickly that, first of all, thank you to the panel. We're going to finish up with the question, but I want to thank a fantastic panel for a lot of great information. Also to let you know that they're all on LinkedIn. So certainly feel free to find them on LinkedIn if you have more questions, or reach out to us at NCTI, and we're happy to follow up with any questions that you may have after this as well, if your question wasn't answered. So we've got a little under a minute to answer a somewhat technical question. So we're going to do what we can to wrap this one up. So how disruptive do you feel upcoming deployment of 5G small cell technology is going to be for MSOs? What can operators do to prepare employees to embrace the trends? That's a big one. That goes probably to you boys.
So my initial reaction is I still feel very optimistic of our position in the markets, and I really think that we're strategically positioned to take on competition. And I think competition brings pressure. Pressure creates diamonds, and we are going to continue to exceed expectations in our company. I'm completely convinced of it.
And to prepare the employee side of it, again, I think if your folks are enabled and empowered to think out of the box, what's coming next, that's just insert new technology here.
Okay.
So I think if you have the structural machine that takes in change and comes out with the next diamond, it doesn't matter what's in that bracket.
That's right.
To me, so
that's a great point.
I agree with you.
Very good. Well, I do think we're out of time. So thank you guys for joining us on the YouTube stream. Are we done? All right. I figured when that thing stopped, we were done. So thank you, live audience, as well, you guys.
Thank you, live audience.
Thank you.
Thanks, panelists. You guys were awesome.
Thank you.